Prescribed burning is the controlled application of fire to a defined area. It has a predetermined range of intensity and rate of spread. It achieves planned land management objectives. Prescribed burning is an important tool in the management of our natural resources. It is used for fire protection, ecological objectives, and forest regeneration. Prescribed burns are also referred to as slash burns, ecological burns, or fuel reduction burns. In Victoria, the Code of Practice for Fire Management on Public Land provides the framework for the planning and conduct of prescribed burning. An area's need for prescribed burning is identified in fire protection plans, forest management plans, or flora and fauna management plans. These plans define the objectives of the prescribed burning. A burn plan is then developed to achieve the objectives defined in the fire protection and other management plans for the area. The burn plan contains a map of the burn area and the specifications and conditions under which a prescribed burn can take place. A prescribed burn cannot take place until a burn plan is available. The burn plan describes the defined perimeter of the burn, assets to be protected, lighting techniques, the lighting pattern to be used, resources to conduct the burn safely and effectively, and control lines. Control lines are any combination of roads, constructed mineral earth breaks, streams, wet gullies, other natural barriers, or treated edges. The width of the control line must match the likely fire behaviour it is intended to stop. Where spotting is likely, a secondary or fallback control line is required. In addition, the burn plan details notification to neighbours, relevant agencies and authorities. Notices to be placed on key access tracks before the burn. Smoke and traffic management issues. Significant environmental values to be protected, and fuel moisture levels and weather conditions under which the burn can proceed.
Well, the objective today is to have a high intensity burn and we're to keep it within the control lines that we've set. We'll be burning for a 100% coverage, and the burn will be conducted as per the burn plan and prescriptions. With current weather conditions, and we have a northeasterly slight wind at the moment, if we are going to have any problems, I envisage that they'll probably be on this western side. I don't think we'll have too many problems, but just be aware for those that are patrolling along that line that we have a fallback line in the road being Hazel Creek Road.
A crew briefing is held on site on the day of the prescribed burn to ensure that all personnel understand their role and how the burn will be conducted. The crew briefing addresses the burn's objectives, control lines, proposed lighting pattern, assets to be protected both inside and outside the burn area, allocation of tasks to crews and individuals, organisation and communication details, assembly areas and safety issues. During the course of the burn, records must be made of weather conditions, fuel moisture contents and fire behaviour.
The 2:30 report, weather report, dry 22, wet 16, which equals 54% relative humidity.
Yeah, received. Cap, thanks.
Details must also be recorded of lighting patterns, resources used and escapes that may have occurred. On completion, the burn is assessed against the planned objective to determine whether follow-up work, such as further burning, is needed. In most situations, rehabilitation works are required. For example, some control lines are constructed solely for the burning operation. In Victoria, when the control lines are no longer required, they should be rehabilitated in line with the Code of Forest Practices for timber production. Prescribed burning, when thoroughly planned and carefully executed, is an effective and efficient fire protection and resource management tool for the protection of parks and forests, maintenance of native flora and fauna, and regeneration of native forests. Occupational health and safety issues must be addressed in the planning and conduct of the burn. All personnel must be fully equipped with personal protective items, such as overalls, hard hat and safety boots. Individuals must be competent and appropriately endorsed in any role or task assigned to them. Some incendiary materials have special requirements with respect to storage and transport. For example, incendiary capsules must be kept separate from the glycol. Large quantities of fusees should not be transported in the cabin of a vehicle. Items such as lighter fuel or drip torches must be correctly secured during transport.
Yeah, do you want a couple of guys to walk through with burners that don't light until they catch up with you so they can take over from you?
Good communications must be maintained with all personnel throughout the burn, particularly with those on foot within the burn's perimeter. Lighting crews must be well briefed and positioned so that in the event of a problem, every individual can be immediately assisted by a colleague. A buddy system is preferred, with each crew member being in line of sight contact with another and in contact with the supervisor. A fire must never be lit down slope or ahead of another crew member. Crews should be made aware of hazards. Hazards include localised steep slopes, areas with greater fuel loads, standing dead trees and mine shafts. Personnel must also be aware of the danger of trees which have burnt off at or near the base and may fall on crews or vehicles. Crews need to be directed to deal with any hazards, for example, using control lines to isolate the fuel hazard. Where smoke from the burn can affect roads, signs must be in place, and where necessary, personnel positioned to direct traffic and reassure the public. If necessary, roads may be closed and traffic redirected. The burnt area must be made secure on completion of the fire. This means that perimeter fuel hazards are made safe. Perimeter fuel hazards include burning trees, stumps and logs likely to fall or roll over the control line. Any significant areas of unburnt fuel within the planned perimeter must be burnt out or excluded from the burn with additional control lines. Roads should only be reopened and crews released once these mopping up operations have been completed.
Yeah, okay, fellas, well, we're just having a breather. Just have a little bit of a...
At the end of the burn, it is good practice to debrief personnel to identify improvements for the next operation.
Some of my notes, we lit up at about 5 to 1.
Prescribed burns that are well planned and well conducted are safe and predictable when crews are correctly equipped, well trained, use safe work practices and follow the burn plan. The lighting equipment available for prescribed burns include matches, drip torches, flamethrowers, incendiary launchers, aerial incendiaries, aerial drip torches, and electric ignition. Wind and waterproof matches, sometimes called fusees, are cheap, easy to use and carry, and are suitable where fuels are dry and easily ignited. For safety reasons, spare boxes are carried in a light shoulder bag. Handheld drip torches are also relatively cheap and easy to use. They are fueled by kerosene, or a 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 mixture of distillate and petrol. Drip torches give assured ignition even of relatively moist fuels. However, experience has shown that crews using drip torches tend to overlight an area, particularly where spot ignition is required. Flamethrowers include short-range units carried by people and long-range vehicle-mounted units. In some parts of the country, broad area prescribed burning is carried out along extended ridge lines. Fire modifies fuels on the upper half of the slopes, but self-extinguishes as it burns into moister fuels on the lower slopes and in gullies. In such situations, rapid ignition along ridge-top tracks is possible with vehicle-mounted flamethrowers. Only accredited personnel should operate this equipment. In parts of the country, fire protection planning requires low-intensity prescribed burning over large areas. Aerial ignition provides the only practical way to ignite and burn such areas in the available burning period. For example, fixed-wing aircraft and helicopters use a machine that automatically injects ethylene glycol into a plastic capsule containing potassium permanganate. The glycol and the potassium permanganate react to produce heat that eventually causes the plastic capsule to ignite, lighting fine fuels in contact with it. Aerial drip torches are being increasingly used to ignite slash fuels. The drip torch is controlled by the operator in the helicopter and drops globules of ignited gelled petrol. This technique allows effective and rapid ignition and has the flexibility to light almost any pattern desired. It does not require any crews to light inside the burn, but some perimeter ignition may be needed. Aerial drip torches require a specialist support team and mixing equipment, which is relatively expensive. Electrical ignition uses pre-laid wire circuits linking electric fuses and gel incendiaries. It can be relatively cheap and allows rapid ignition. Lighting patterns can be manipulated by the wire circuit's layout. Crews are not required to walk into the burn. However, circuits can be damaged by animals, and there's a small danger of premature ignition from lightning.
There's the wires leading into the electric fuse head. There's a match compound connected, and it's all wrapped to the blivet. Okay, we'll place it in here amongst all these.
Incendiary launchers allow ignition of fuels in difficult-to-reach situations, such as short, steep slopes or areas of thick vegetation. This commonly used gas-powered incendiary capsule launcher has a range of about 100 metres. Each type of equipment has particular advantages and disadvantages. Personnel should understand the equipment and the conditions under which to use them. In all cases, only accredited personnel should use fire lighting equipment. One of the most widespread applications of prescribed burning is for fuel modification in mixed species foothill forests and heathland. These burns may be for fuel reduction or ecological objectives, or both. The objectives for fuel reduction are to burn the surface litter fuels, bark fuels and the shrub layer. The objectives for ecological burns vary depending on the requirements of the species or vegetation types being targeted. These burns are usually of low intensity to minimise scorch damage to trees within the burn area. Flame heights are less than 1.5 metres and rates of spread are typically less than 100 metres per hour. These and other details relating to the conduct of the burn are described in the burn plan and relevant burning guides. The lighting pattern used to apply fire in a low-intensity burn will have a big influence on fire behaviour. To prevent escape, the fire is usually established first in fuels on the upslope or downwind edge of the burning unit. Once good perimeter control has been achieved, further ignition can occur downslope or into the wind using either spot or line ignition. The choice between spot ignition or line ignition will determine the proportion of the area burnt by the head fire, flank fires and the backfire. For fires spreading from individual spots, approximately 1/3 of the area is burnt by the head fire, which is the hottest part of the fire. The other 2/3 are burnt by flank and backfire, which are of a lower intensity. By contrast, fire spreading from line ignition moves faster, so approximately 5/6 of the area is burnt by the head fire. These differences, how fires spread, can be used to your advantage. In drier fuels, fire intensity can be kept lower by lighting spots. Where fuels are moist and ignition difficult, line ignition can be used to raise fire intensity. Whenever possible, use a grid system of spot ignition. Burn the boundary first. Once this edge is secured, light individual fires along parallel strips at right angles to the wind direction or slope. Light these parallel fires in a staggered formation, making sure the person leading is on the upslope or downwind line. Avoid lighting individual fires closer than planned, as the meeting of the fires will result in junction zones. Junction zones are areas of increased flame height and fire intensity, which can cause greater damage from scorch and spotting. The lighting pattern is initially determined from fire behaviour guides or by observation of test fires and may be adjusted as the burn progresses. Once a burn is lit, it must be brought out to the external edges as soon as possible. This helps prevent the subsequent reignition of unburnt fuel and any potential escapes over the control lines. Several factors lead to escapes from the defined perimeter. The most critical factor is usually increased wind speed, as this can cause spot fires. The fire's behaviour may be hotter than expected. Control lines may be inadequate for the actual fire behaviour experienced. There may be insufficient personnel and equipment to cope with the perimeter fire behaviour. Escapes must be suppressed immediately and the reason for them investigated. Regular perimeter patrols are carried out during and after the burn. Mopping up work can begin once fine fuels are burnt out on any part of the perimeter. Patrols are maintained until the burn is declared safe. In summary, low-intensity prescribed burns are used to reduce fuel hazard or modify the vegetation, have low flame heights and slow rates of spread, consume only surface litter fuels, bark fuels and the lower shrub layer, have a lighting pattern that is either spot or line ignition. have control lines and resources that match expected fire behaviour, and are patrolled until the burn is declared safe. High-intensity burns are another form of prescribed burning. High-intensity burns are used to burn the slash from harvesting operations and for ecological purposes. The high fuel loads resulting from forestry operations and the dense shrub layers in native forests create burns of high intensity. Flame over 2 metres and the fire spreads rapidly. High-intensity burns are used to reduce the fire hazard in harvested coops and create suitable conditions for regeneration by removing competition and releasing nutrients. The burn objectives, expected fire behaviour and other details relating to the conduct of the burn are described in the burn plan and relevant burning guides.
And the fuel moisture content outside the burn, 20%, and inside the burn, 8%. Over.
Yes, thanks, Kev.
Fuel moisture contents are critical to the success of the burn and the ability to control escapes, and must be measured accurately. This is done by using a fine fuel moisture meter to determine the moisture differential between slash fuels to be burnt and surface fuels in surrounding forest which are not to be burnt. Fuel in the surrounding forest must have a higher moisture level than the slash. This allows for greater control because if escapes do occur, they will travel more slowly. The monitoring of these fuels, weather and crew disposition is vitally important in slash burns.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, nothing further this stage, man.
Lighting techniques for high-intensity burns may include the use of handheld drip torches, electrical ignition or aerial drip torch. The lighting pattern is either central convection ignition or strip ignition or a combination of both. With central convection ignition, a strong convection column is formed when fuels in the centre of the area are burnt. This creates indrafts around the area's entire perimeter. Fire from subsequent ignition is drawn toward the centre. Successful convection ignition increases crew safety, visibility and perimeter control. Convection ignition, however, should only be used when the slope is less than 10 degrees and the wind speed less than 15 kilometres per hour. Strip ignition is used when burning on slopes greater than 10 degrees or when wind speeds are more than 15 kilometres per hour. Strip ignition involves lighting a narrow strip of fuel along the upslope or downwind edge. When the strip of fuel has burned sufficiently to provide a safe edge, further strips are lit progressively downslope or upwind. Ignition along each strip may be continuous or spaced in spots, depending on fuel, weather and slope conditions. Where individual fires are moving under the influence of slope or wind, there will be a pronounced head, flank and backfire zones. The lighting pattern should ensure that the edge of the burning unit is affected by flank or backfire only. Fire behaviour in slash burns can be particularly intense. Mass ignition of heavy concentrations of fuel can cause extreme forms of fire behaviour, such as fire whirls and mass spotting. Once ignited, these fires cannot be extinguished for some time, and the task of patrol crews is to control spot-overs or boundary escapes. On completion, the burn must be assessed as soon as possible to determine whether objectives have been achieved and whether or not some follow-up action is required. In Victoria, the control lines not required in the future must be breached and barred in accordance with the provisions of the Code of Forest Practices for Timber Production. In summary, high-intensity prescribed burns use fuel-moisture differentials to increase control, have tall flame heights and rapid rates of spread, are used to reduce fuel hazards and meet ecological objectives, are lit by either central convection ignition or strip lighting, have control lines and resources that match expected fire behaviour, and are patrolled until the burn is declared safe. Prescribed burning can be used to achieve a diverse range of land management objectives, provided it is well planned and conducted according to clear, well-defined procedures, which deliver safe work practices and manageable fire behaviour.